Star Walker Studios presents Game Master's Journey, your multi-dimensional RPG podcast. Hello, listener. Greetings, fellow GM and or player. Welcome to episode 88 of Game Master's Journey, your multi-dimensional RPG podcast. I'm your host, Lex Starwalker, and I'm transmitting to you today from the Obsidian Monolith somewhere outside time and space. Ryan Chaddock is joining me on the show today, and if you don't know who Ryan is, Ryan has published numerous Numenera products and right now has a Kickstarter going for a D&D 5th edition product called Swans of Black. So Ryan and I are going to talk a little bit about that and tell you about Swans of Black. And we're also going to talk about third-party publishing in general and the new D&D 5th edition open gaming license. So kick back and relax and enjoy the interview. Ryan Chaddock is joining me on the show today. And Ryan, I think this is your first time on Game Master's Journey, isn't it?
Yeah, although I've been on your shows before.
Yes, GM Intrusions a few times, I think. So
absolutely.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so you have a totally awesome Kickstarter going right now for 5th edition D&D called Swans of Black.
Yeah, I do.
You want to tell us about it?
Yeah, we got like 6 days left on it.
Nice.
We actually started it before the 5th edition OGL came out.
Oh,
we
okay.
didn't know. We didn't know it was coming out this week.
Right.
But we were doing a Kickstarter for 5th Ed anyway, because some other third parties they've been finding ways to kind of use the 3rd edition license.
Right. Yeah.
To get away with it, and we figured there was enough of them that it was probably safe, legally speaking, to start working on that, because we've been really excited about 5th edition for, since it came out. But I mean, like, we've been kind of working away at how to do our own content, publishable stuff for over a year now. I've been just cranking out, practicing in terms of writing. So anyway, Swans of Black it's kind of a weird thing. So actually, this is kind of cool to get to talk about it.
Yeah, because this isn't just your average everyday supplement. Like, you're doing something different, which is cool.
Yeah, and part of it's just that I've got a weird crew that I've put together. I teamed up with an artist friend of mine named Avery, and she and I, we game 5th edition, and she's always got really cool little portraits of the table that she'll draw. She just draws like decks of portraits.
Nice.
We'll use them when we're playing, and I was like, wow, these are amazing. I'd love to work with you, and so finally, after quite a while of sort of, coming to trust each other, we partnered up, and Avery is like really into more story-based gaming. I've always been a little bit more, we've talked about it before. You and I think, both have a background in more White Wolf-based games.
Yeah.
I think that Cypher System has spoiled me a little bit in terms of going more narrative.
Yeah.
And so when looking at 5th edition stuff, and working with my editor, our sort of managing editor, Joseph De Simone, we wanted to do something that wasn't just sort of run-of-the-mill, adventures or just a bunch of mechanics. What we wanted to do is kind of blend story with player options.
Okay.
And so it's a two-pronged approach, essentially. We're creating these things called swans that are both well-developed story seeds that are scalable in terms of size and scope, that are providing everything you need as a DM to sort of, build a moment, a campaign moment, sort of a world-changing sort of thing, potentially. And on the other side, taking up about the same amount of space in the book, will be player options that tie in with it.
Oh, cool.
And so the idea is that this actually helps the DM because, obviously it helps the player because oftentimes when I run campaigns, I'll write like campaign Bible and nobody cares, what's going on. They care about the moment to moment or, kind of what's next on the adventure, but our thought was that it's a lot more fun when things are directly tied in. And as a writer who games, it's pretty easy for me. I often will just write custom rules to be like, okay, well, this is happening in the world. You know, the orcs are becoming strangely psionic, and if you're a half orc, well, you can have access to some of that.
Cool. I like it.
And I'll write up the rules. Not everybody writes rules or feels comfortable with that. For some reason, many gamers are a little touchy about custom stuff. Everything has to be official. And so I'm trying to help with that, sort of build a bridge between the player and the DM in terms of making it so that it's a single story. But what's weird about it is these are not adventures. These are well fleshed out story seeds, extremely well fleshed out, with sort of options and monsters and things, but they're not precisely adventures. So it's a little bit different. It's more flexible than a sort of campaign.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
I need to. I haven't done yet. I need to back the Kickstarter because I totally want this because this is the kind of thing I want. I don't necessarily want an adventure, or especially I don't want a campaign. An adventure is okay if it's short, but what I really want is exactly what you're talking about. Just something that I can kind of do whatever I want with.
Exactly, and I think that as gamers get more mature, we're often at that point where we're like, well, I definitely want to have a creative influence on my campaign. I can figure out what's best for my campaign. I just want some ideas. Right. I just need the spices. I can supply the rest of it. And so that's kind of what we're trying to do. I think that it's, looking at Kickstarter, I went through and looked up every 5th edition related Kickstarter I could find. And probably 75% of them were adventure modules, and oftentimes it's just people kind of just publishing their weekly game. They'll collect them up at the end of the month and publish them. A few others are a little more advanced than that, but I think the market's a little flooded on that. I think we all have access to a lot of adventure stuff. Certainly, adventures seem to be the focus of the new Dungeon Masters Guild stuff. Which is the new marketplace for Forgotten Realms related open gaming content. Sort of, it's its own license, but that they seem to be focusing on adventures, and that's cool. We want to go in a different direction, and having such a wonderful artist, we can really evoke fairly precisely what we're looking for in terms of. So I guess ours is a little bit more about this sort of. The in-depth flavor and the inspiration but here's the mechanics to go along with these cool ideas. Yeah. Because I don't know. All these guys on the team, they seem to think I'm pretty good at writing mechanics. I think that's something I've gotten a reputation for. So I'm really, and I've been practicing work and, play testing and all that stuff with 5th edition. It's tricky. It's very different from, putting together rules for Cypher System where it's, there's not a lot to look up. Right. Yeah. When you're writing a Cypher System rule, you're like, do this and it's difficulty this, or use the level of this, whatever. Yeah. It's not hard to be balanced, but
there's no XP budgets.
Oh God, don't get me started on XP budgets. No, but I mean, if you write an effect that, it's easy to write effects that essentially have loopholes. There's a lot of unintended consequences for almost anything. It's hard to innovate on things because of that. Where you're like, oh, now I need to look up this and I need to look at this and how are they doing this? I mean, and that's just for player options. Monsters are a whole other thing. So yeah, D&D it's an interesting thing to write for. That's all I can say. It takes it's a many step process. Whereas Cypher System, you can sort of. Just let your imagination run wild to write,
Yeah. Well, I know when I was running a lot of Numenera, one of my favorite ways to come up for adventures is I would just go various places on the internet and just look at really cool sci-fi or fantasy art, or best yet, a blending of the two, and just find something that just really gave me an idea. And then I would just base an adventure off that one picture. Right. And what you're talking about here, Swans of Black, that's kind of, it sounds like what you're doing is you're giving us the picture, but then you're also saying, and here's some ideas that we've already come up with that you can run with, you know?
Right. And our hope is to make this as scalable as possible. So the idea
Oh,
is,
cool.
one of the swans, because we're taking the name from Black Swan events, which is this idea that things can happen that are utterly unpredictable.
Okay.
And because of that, in the real world, that kind of throws a wrench into any kind of predictive algorithms, right?
Right.
I actually have a degree in applied economics, and so
nice.
I'm pretty familiar with this kind of stuff. But so I want to take that concept and apply it to games.
Yeah.
A campaign doesn't have to be this event, but there should be events going on that are beyond the players initially, and player characters get involved and tie their destinies up into them and have a blast. And so what we want to do is make this scalable in terms of region. You could start with something really small, and that's where it's starting, perhaps.
Yeah.
And it could get bigger from there, or you're just using that one little bit. But a lot of these, it's easier to think of them as world scale events. Like, for instance, one of ours is about, like, one of the moons in whatever your campaign you're in moves out of alignment and changes the tides, and it changes the nature of magic. So how does that affect the world? Those things together, monsters coming up out of the sea, and certain beings suddenly having new access to magic, and old magic doesn't function if it's really formulaic, like wizard magic, and what those people who used to have those things would have to do to maybe regain some of their power, maybe cobbling together what's left. So each of these little events have all of these other repercussions, and so it's all about kind of filling in all of those details and really just filling the book with ideas. So it's going to be a pretty hefty book. Right now it's at 80 pages. If we hit a couple stretch goals out, we'll bump it up to 100.
Nice.
So nice big tome.
Yeah, that'll be awesome.
Yeah, it's a blast. I mean, and that's the thing too, is that, like, all the Cypher System work I've done has really prepared me for this.
Yeah.
I feel like I've taken the slow and steady route to getting to publish.
Yeah, and for anyone listening who's not familiar with Cypher System games, I mean, you've published quite a few products for those games already.
Yeah, I think I have 12 licenses at this point.
Nice.
I just picked up a new one, actually. So I have half of a campaign written for using the kind of built on their Into the Night supplement. So
cool.
I'll release that at some point here.
Yeah, so you can go to Drive-Thru RPG and see your body of work.
Yeah, Ryan Chaddock Games, and it is on there, and all of my work is at $1 right now, or free if it was already free, through the end of the Kickstarter. So if people want to take a look at what I've got, sort of what my
nice.
On some level, what our production values are, things are going to get stepped up with this one, because we've got, Avery's going to be doing a lot of the art, and she's stepping up in terms of being our what do you call it, artistic director.
Oh, nice.
So she'll be directing me in terms of the sort of supplementary art that I usually do.
Cool.
Because I have kind of a weird style that I've developed. It's so funny being an independent, publisher, and being an artist and a writer. It's weird, and a publisher and a media person and all that stuff.
Yeah, you gotta do it all.
Exactly. Well, and that's prepped me for this kind of stuff. And the Kickstarter is doing pretty well. We've hit our first stretch goal, and we funded it in the first day, and we're moving up. Hopefully in the next few days we'll get a little bit more on there. But it's pretty exciting. Like, this is doing so much better than my books normally do, right? The other books I've done in terms of sales. So, like, it's just, I feel like I've kind of stepped onto the world stage as a publisher, finally. Nice. Like, really moved into the more professional level. And I feel good about it because we practiced. We've published 13 books, so we're kind of used to it. And that's the thing with the large tome. Like I was saying, like 80 to 100 page book is now no big deal for me. Like, we're ready for it. Yeah. So that's, I don't know. It's cool to be in that position. Like, because a 100 page book is a little bit long, right? That's a big thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you were looking at a traditional, one of the major publishers, they have a lot that size, but it's not nothing. But for me, that's something I can do in 2.5 months of writing. It's not that big of a deal. So, and D&D takes a little bit more work. again, because there's more research involved and playtesting. But you know, we're promising delivery in 6 months, but I think we'll get it well under that.
Awesome.
Unless we have kind of a problem with the art. So yeah, pretty exciting.
And I mean, you've much more than reached your goal at this point. But do you remember how quickly you reached it?
I want to say in about 10 hours.
Oh, nice. Very nice.
We hit it 1,000. And again, I mean, I think that it's weird because my editor, Joe, he backs all these video games, right?
Okay.
And a video game has such high funding levels required, right? And that's a vastly different scale. For me, as an independent role-playing game publisher, hitting $1,000 worth of sales in a few hours is amazing.
Yeah.
So you have to understand the scale that we're working at here. I mean, that's pretty cool as an indie, as just, a guy who a couple of years ago started publishing. That's, we're well above that now. It's pretty cool. And the idea that this is just the beginning, that we could do a few more of these a year, this is really cool. I feel like we're finally, figuring this stuff out. And then of course to be doing it right now when the fifth edition license is coming out, get to really test out this license and be part of, perhaps a legion of people all getting out there and publishing. And
well, there already has been just the last few days. I've seen so many posts on Google Plus about people having this, that, or the other thing available.
Why not? Well, and I mean, because we knew that it was coming out eventually. And so I started writing books just in prep. And then eventually we're like, well, maybe they're not, so we better just do it. And so so I have actually half books on my hard drive ready to be finished up.
Nice.
And it's good. That was good practice, honestly. I hope people aren't rushing to publish without kind of thinking through everything.
Yeah.
There's always going to be bad rules out there like that. We can't really help that. But this is a game that needs a little bit more finesse with wording and knowledge, a pretty comprehensive knowledge. Yeah. I was playing D&D just yesterday, and boy, there were a couple things I had forgotten in the couple months since I'd been playing. I was like, oh man, I sure hope nobody calls me on this. Aren't you running a Kickstarter for 5th edition? You don't know this. It's like, well, there's all these fiddly little things to remember, and you forget which is with which edition. And you play other games, and so you think their rules apply, and can't do that when you're publishing, or you shouldn't, at least. You gotta be real careful.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think it's really interesting what we have to do to publish too, in that sense, where it's you need a vision of what you're trying to create. You need a unique idea, and you need a comprehensive knowledge of the specific mechanics involved in what you're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, for instance, with the Forgotten Realms content, I don't know that I'm going to want to do that. I don't know the lore well enough to do it justice.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of lore.
It's the most lore. Forgotten Realms is from the 60s, really. So because it has its roots in these stories that were told. So boy, I don't know if I would feel up to that. Maybe I'll let other people do that.
Be spending a lot of time at Candlekeep.
Yeah, I don't even. Oh, man, I would. Yeah, I would have a hard time.
Just the research to run a campaign in Forgotten Realms is mind-boggling. Much rather trying to write a supplement for it. Right.
Well, I was playing in it a few months ago, and I was like, I don't know if I can do this. Am I ready to play in this? I had to talk to the DM. Be like, how much of this do I need to know?
Right. Yeah.
That much. Oh, okay. We're going to another world. Okay, that'll be fine. As long as we're going to a different world at some point, I'll be able to handle it. Throw the lore out the window.
Yep.
Well, and the meta plots and things. That's all kinds of difficult as well, knowing exactly what's at the current threshold of the timeline.
Right.
As much as I like meta plots, I was a big fan of the Vampire the Masquerade meta plot, and I think that the Swans of Black stuff could be used in that sense. That's really kind of what it is. By the way, the way people talk about, say, the Masquerade meta plot, each of our swans is essentially that. It's, what if this happened to your world and totally messed it up. What could we do? Because I ran with that a lot of times. I mean, over and over and over again with Masquerade, I would run the assault by the Sabbat on the East Coast.
Okay.
Just for different groups of players or from different perspectives, what happens when the Sabbat finally, carves their way up from Atlanta to New York? And because I knew it so well from their novels, right? And so I could do the timeline. To me, that's what's really cool. This it starts small and there's all these little foreshadowing moments and interesting things falling into the right hands. And what happens is this whole thing spirals out of control, and the leaders who created it don't really have a hold on what's going on, or the old regimes are sort of changed, and that's what we want to do. That's to us. That's what a Black Swan is. It's this thing that really shakes up the world, and maybe that's what your campaign needs here and there, or or not. But I think we all want to break D&D out of its old mold.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're right.
There's some stagnant, inherent elements to Dungeons and Dragons where it's well, we're just going to do a dungeon. We're just going to do this. And, and those things are fun. But if that's all the game is week to week, or this sort of normal, tried and true ways of playing, don't invite me. That's not what I want. I want to be challenged emotionally or in my role playing. I want to be challenged intellectually. I definitely want the tactics that D&D brings and the customization that those rules bring on the player side. Not to mention the DM side, but I don't want to play under a DM who's well, I'll just use these basic elements and kind of just iterate on the way that we've always played. I've done that, games need to be changing me, right? Or I need to be influencing my friends and all of us sort of coming to new ideas. That's what games should be. I mean, because games ultimately are a creative, intellectual exercise. It is, it's exercise for the brain, and in addition to being fun. So why not make it something important and useful, not just a reason to eat snacks?
Yeah, exactly.
So I guess that's good. I mean, in a sense, that's sort of our vision for our little company, Scrivened, is to push boundaries, kind of poke at what's normal and break it a little bit, break what's normal for some people who are willing to try things out. That's, I think, what our goal is to just let people, and especially for DMs, I think that surprising your players is really helpful. I think sort of rocking their world is one of the most enjoyable experiences,
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
I went to Encounters, D&D Encounters the other day, and my brother was playing there with some of my friends and some other folks I didn't know. And one of the tables they weren't having a lot of fun. And I was like, this is the, the problem is everyone here is in kind of an old D&D mindset, or in some cases, they're just new to the game. So I was talking to my brother, I was like, I need to show you some good gaming. So I made him play a game with me the next day, and I ran Numenera because it's really easy with that particular game to sort of do off the cuff stuff that's sort of a blast.
Yeah.
That's a system that inherently just crazy stuff happens off the cuff. You don't have to plan for mind-blowing people. it just is that thing. And to Monty Cook's credit, right? I mean, just telling people that game is about weird. Everything is weird. Focus on the weird. Here's how you do weird. That opens a lot of doors creatively, right?
Yeah.
To the DM, you're like, oh, I'm not allowed to just have a dungeon. This has to have something crazy. And that crazy thing doesn't need to be explained. If a player pokes at it, you can just say, you don't know. You don't know why that happened. Well, that allows you, that forces you to come up with crazy ideas.
Right.
It forces you to write down weird dreams. That's what if D&D made you do that?
Yeah.
Whenever you have a weird dream, you have to have a pad of paper by the bedside that you can write that for your D&D campaign. That's the way D&D should work. I would love to unlock that. I'm utterly inspired by the new generation of games in general. There's just so many great games out there that are saying, well, let's not just play the same old way.
Yeah.
Well, why can't we do that for for the game that everybody's playing. The largest number of people are playing. Which is D&D really.
Yeah, totally. And a lot of that's just kind of how you approach the game. You don't necessarily, need a different game or,
Right.
the house rule everything. You can just put a different spin on it.
And I think that it, just to compare those two games, Numenera does it through lightweight. It says, make up whatever you want and just we've given you easy rules so that's easy.
Yeah. On a scale of 1 to 10, how hard is that to do?
Right. D&D doesn't work that way. It requires a lot more minutia, like knowledge of minutia, in order to improvise. But at the same time, there's a lot of stuff that's pretty easy to sort of form factor. Lots of people have done some things where you just take old monster rules and rebuild them, build new things out of them, because the rules don't need to be modified. The core stat blocks, things like that, where it's like, or just, I think there are simple ways that you can sort of embellish on things. Spells obviously are one of the major ways of having like hugely affecting things. And you see that a lot in the writing. It'll be like, well, this works just like this spell.
Right.
So if we can move into a situation where spells are a little bit more thought of more as sort of some magical building blocks, and they can be changed. Maybe they're more like sort of customizable tools.
Yeah.
What if this spell worked this other way? And that's what effect is going on here over a broad region. That's an easier way to sort of think of things. Mm-hmm. And I would like it if we all got out of sort of the rut. And maybe I want to say that those of us playing D&D are too much in the rut. I think there are some great DMs out there, great tables, but we can everybody can always do better. And you certainly do see here and there, games go off the rails or they get boring or whatever. Like, I think there's a lot, it's a craft that can be worked on. And I guess I'd like to step up to the plate and help as best I can, with these supplements.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been going through kind of a similar thing where, it's like I've been running or playing RPGs for, close to 20 years now, and anything you do for that long, there comes a point where, how much are you doing things just because that's the way you've always done them? And
absolutely,
you need to kind of take a step back and say, is there a better way to do what I'm doing?
Right. Yeah. Well, and it's a double-edged sword in the sense that experience gives you, a toolbox. Essentially, you have this toolbox of oh, this came up, I know how to fix that.
Right. Yeah.
In that sense, I really enjoy all of the experience I've got. But yeah, you don't have fresh eyes as much. I think that's a problem sometimes. And that's why, it's fun to get new supplements, or it's fun to get new games and really just take a look. I think there's so much we can learn from even games you're not playing.
Yeah.
For me, it's all about collecting games and putting them up on my shelf, and so I can get them down when we need to, and be like, well, what are these guys doing for that mechanic? Oh, what does their skill list look like? Why aren't we doing this? There's just so many little things like that.
Yeah.
I ran Numenera the other day, and for a group of people who'd never played it, and the intrusion mechanic just, and we know this, but the intrusion mechanic was just mind blowing. And the same with the major and minor effects. Just why can't we do that with D&D?
Yeah.
Just little touches like that.
Yeah.
Those are rules that you can write in a few sentences.
Yeah.
Why is that so hard for us to adapt into our games and be like, no, that's Cypher system. This is D&D. These things don't touch. You're not allowed to learn from that.
Right.
That rule is too big. No, that rule is a sentence. Like, if I want to apply that rule, it takes nothing, right?
Yeah.
Almost no work in order to build an intrusion mechanic or a major minor effect mechanic, just as an example. So really, our games are much more flexible than we think, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
These ruts really keep us from having fun, I think.
Well, I know when I run D&D, the way I do inspiration is basically just like the way you spend XP in Numenera to re-roll something. It's like you get to do that whenever, and you can do it for other people,
Sure.
Just because it's like, why not? I like that.
I think the inspiration mechanic is so vague that it's one of the coolest things in the game.
Yeah.
I think that there's just so much I, as a third-party developer, can do with that mechanic I almost want to just go crazy with it. I mean, what if you just made just a totally narrative version of D&D? Just take from Fiasco and stuff. Inspiration could easily be the heart of turning something. Because honestly, at the table, I'm not seeing enough people gaining advantage and disadvantage. I mean, you get it here and there from some spells, but I think that mechanically, at least in the core book, there's a little bit of hesitation for granting advantage, whereas I'm used to in Numenera granting assets to people just constantly.
Yep. That's kind of how I look at it, like the same way. Like in Numenera, you're supposed to look for ways to get assets. I kind of,
Exactly. Well, and I mean, so, like at the table, what that does is makes it so the player has incentive to role play combat.
Right.
Or be tactical in a social interaction. Because ultimately there's going to be some role there.
Right.
Well, that blending of social interactions and combat as being equally important, like equally tactical, equally role playing, like that is my goal. Like I would love to have more of both of those things, because I really dislike the fact, for instance, in publishing and in the game world, people like to separate this idea of fluff and crunch, right?
Yeah.
The story is this separate thing from the mechanic.
Yeah.
And we see that in publishing where you physically separate them. And this is an argument I get in with people sometimes over, whether they want the rules mixed in. It's harder to find the rules, or whether you want them separate. To me, separating them out is part of a larger mindset of this, like, well, the mechanics are all that are real. That's what's really happening. The plot is just the window dressing, the set pieces around it.
Yeah.
Around what's actually happened, which is I'm draining these guys of hit points with my sword. And that's I don't think that's how we should be playing. We should be playing so the mechanics are just a guideline for the story.
Right. Yeah.
Like ideally we're playing Let's Pretend, and here and there we've got a rule that says, no, if somebody says bang in this way, then you're dead. It'd be nice to think of rules as the extra piece to this story you're telling, rather than the other way around, where the story is sort of just hanging on, and you're there to drain hit points with swords so that you can get gold, so you can get better swords. That's kind of a problem. But yeah, so I don't know. I think that I think the OGL is an amazing thing. I think that's actually been WotC's sort of gift to us, to the world, is having these OGLs.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think it's really, they've sacrificed a lot, right? I mean, we see that they've accidentally built competitors for themselves, and so we've all benefited from that, right? So they have to be more competitive in an economic sense, both in terms of the quality of their products and giving what the audience wants in a more modern way, that changing with the times, and perhaps pricing, things like that.
Yeah.
I think that's so cool.
Wizards.
Right? They're willing to do that. And whether the people are there now that had anything to do with that, I don't think so. But the fact that they're willing to do it again with this edition, I think, is amazing. And it was later than we thought, but it's a better license because it carves out a number of things in better ways. It looks like it's carving out for art, making so that art is not passed along with the open content.
Okay.
So that's cool. It's going to be easier to hire artists and things like that. Copyright protection is such an important thing.
Yeah.
For some of us, and being able to work within their rules is important too. So, I'm really, I don't know. I just think we're living in just such an amazing golden age where you can do just digital distribution, and that'll be the majority of what you're doing. You don't have to have a huge upfront cost. We have these licenses. We have, I take advantage of Creative Commons for artwork, as the basis of my artwork. Like, it's just all of these things together. And of course, with crowdfunding, the way that it is, like, where Kickstarter is essentially advertising, right? I mean, I'm getting more exposure by putting something on Kickstarter than I would be just running an ad for my stuff on drive-through. So that's pretty cool that we live in this time where, just asking for help and trying to sell your product, that's advertising.
Yeah.
So I think that we're going to see an explosion of third-party companies come out and
really,
I
think so too.
change the game, right? I think that's what we're trying to do, my company. But I think everybody wants to, you know.
Well, it's good for us as gamers too, because God knows Wizards hasn't put much out for us since the DMG Monster Manual and Player's Guide. So
Right, yeah. They've really cut down on their staff.
yeah,
I
yeah,
think I heard in an interview they said they have 22 people working for D&D. Um, like that's pretty small. My staff's 4, so
yeah, right.
you know,
Yep.
yeah, that's a small. They're not going to put out a lot with that small number of people. And obviously they're being more conservative. Like this is the opposite of that sort of 90s or whatever heyday with all of the different campaign settings they were doing and just splitting their market. It's the other way around, right? And we've seen them talk about sort of the kind of minimum sales they want for every product is on a scale that's unimaginable to the rest of us publishing. Like they need to sell just tons and tons of units, or they just won't make a book. And if that's what we need in order to have them there to help support this industry, I think that that's okay. And certainly that helps me as a third party person. And I've found
Yep.
that. I mean, that's even just working with Money Cook Games, working with their licenses. My goal was from the beginning to sort of fill in the stuff that I knew MCG probably would not be able to do. They just don't have time to flesh out certain things. And so I would do entire books on these interesting little crevices in their setting or
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
that needed a little bit of work. I think I got a reputation for that. I see that here once in a while when people are reviewing me. They're like, well, Ryan's the one who fleshes out those little things that we always wanted or whatever. So I think that that's probably what we're going to be doing with D&D as well.
There are a lot of crevices, man.
Yeah, at least in terms of this edition.
Yep.
I mean, D&D is a bigger game, right? I mean, it's massive in terms of the things that have been published. It's hard to come up with a unique idea in some cases, thematically, but in terms of just big ideas. But I don't mind a challenge. I think that's fun. You know what I mean? If I'm just like, I sometimes feel this way about Kickstarter in general, right? I mean, if you just want to make some money, you could put out. I joke that I could just put out a steampunk Cthulhu monster manual, right? And I just make millions, right? That's you just have to have Cthulhu or steampunk in something, and Kickstarter loves it. And to me, that's an old idea. I mean, those ideas have been around and everybody's doing them. So I'm never going to do those things. I might touch on the fringes of those things, but to me, we really need new ideas.
Yeah.
So I don't mind taking the bullet and not making as much money by not indulging in those. If people want Cthulhu stuff, there's plenty of it out there for you, so you can find it. But it's not going to be my focus, So that challenge is kind of fun. The challenge to find new ideas. I think we all need to make an effort to be weird,
I agree.
Go out on limbs, and I think that our hobby lends itself to that. I mean,
Yeah.
very few people get to just sit around with their friends and make things up, right?
Yeah.
So it's not that I'm not saying that we have players have a duty to do that, but it would be nice if we lived in a world where we're all coming up with crazy stuff, and we have opportunities other people don't, right? Like some people get, they're musicians or artists and they get to kind of jam or whatever and work together to come up with artistic things. But like gamers, we're logical and creative, and we do it on a regular basis. We schedule time with our friends to be creative, and so we're in a special place as humans to be this sort of font of ideas and creativity. So why not be that, right?
Yeah, totally. And a lot of times, people that have other types of creativity can also find inspiration in playing role-playing games for their other types of creativity, whether that's music or art or anything.
Well, and they bring a special perspective. Like I like gaming with Avery, my partner, on this project because she's an artist and she's a LARPer and things like that. And so, I mean, her perspective is vastly different from your traditional sort of war gamer, or even just a regular sort of grognard from the shop,
Yeah.
the gaming shop. It's a totally different style of play, and they bring something else to the table. So I like the fact that gaming is it's kind of a place to come bring a bunch of different people together, and including artists, and refresh their artistic energies so they can go back out and do crazy stuff. And it's so cool that as a publisher, we get to do that too. I mean, as a writer, I'm creative. I work with artists. You get to have this sort of feedback loop of creativity.
Yeah, exactly.
I really like, for me, D&D's sort of like more quaint elements. Like you're having traveling food and you're stopping and resting and things like that. To me, it makes me. I think it's because I read Dragonlance when I was so young.
Yeah.
I get like teary-eyed almost. I mean, like, I take that stuff very, very seriously. As much as I want to push the game forward, I can't give up on inns and
right. Yeah, I'm the same way.
I love making, you make stew for D&D, or you have some bread and cheese. Like, I think that's really important to like feel it, to really like be part of it. Have a mead, Yeah.
I used to be lucky at my parents' house growing up. The room that we would play D&D in had a cast iron wood stove, and that was awesome in the winter.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, have an actual fire going at least. Would be, or not at least, but and certainly that's been, in my experience, camping. That was playing Werewolf the Apocalypse while camping. Like, that's something everybody should have on their bucket list.
Yeah.
Like, that's an experience. Like, you got to be whittling,
right,
dirty, wearing flannel. Maybe this is a Pacific Northwest thing, but like. I love it.
You see people in flannel in Indiana.
No, certainly with flannel, but I think there's a point where Werewolf the Apocalypse really was speaking to me as an Oregonian.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. We cross paths. I forgot about that. You started out here and went there, and I started there and came out here.
Right. It's
hilarious.
Well, I'm living in Bloomington out there. They say it's a suburb of Portland, basically. So at least I found a little piece of Oregon out in the Midwest.
Yeah, that's definitely, if you're in Indiana, I think that's the place you want to be.
Yeah, certainly.
For sure.
Yeah. It's so nice being close to Indianapolis for the Gen Con, you get to go there and run games. I love running games for strangers. I don't know why. Growing up, I was so introverted, but it's kind of a blast now. Like, kind of showing off on improvisation. I love it.
I enjoyed it, but I was always sad that I'd never game with these people again. I was like, man, I wish we could do this every week.
I mean, if you run a good game, you could probably get them to do a Skype game with you later or something.
Yeah.
Some people. Yeah, no, it's always sad. It's almost like theater. I used to work in theater, and it's like everybody says they're going to stay in touch after a show, and they never do.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like a little piece. I hadn't really thought about that. I really feel like running a game at a con is very similar to theater. Like, you're kind of shoved together, and you don't get to pick who you're playing with, and there's a lot of performance involved.
Sometimes you don't get to pick your role so much either.
Absolutely, yeah, totally.
It's like, oh, you're the last guy here. Yeah, you get the schizophrenic dwarf. Have fun with that.
Or if you're running it for a company, you don't get to pick the script, but you work with it, kind of do your own editorial changes as a director, and then make it work for your style.
Yeah.
That's pretty close. That's amazing. So I don't know if we have any other topics we want to talk about here.
So you've got 4 days to get to the Kickstarter.
It ends on Sunday morning.
Sunday morning? Okay.
If I remember correctly. Yeah. Got a few days left. Hopefully it'll take off. We'll hit a few stretch goals in the next few days, and it's getting pretty exciting.
You have very reasonable prices too.
Oh, you think so? I'm glad.
So, some of these Kickstarters, the price is kind of, I'm like, what?
It's hard to price. It's really hard because you have to cover all kinds of risk involved.
Sure.
So it's difficult, but without scaring people away with too big of prices. So we're starting to run out of those $100 ones. I think we only have 2 left for having a custom portrait. So I might add some other level at some point if we have to in the next couple days, just to make sure people have the option of getting a little bit more cool stuff. But they can pick them up, and you can pick up all my books for $1 on Drive-Thru RPG right now. Each of the PDFs is just $1, and I've sold, I don't know, 800 or 900 at this point. of those. So lots of people going in there and taking a look.
And I'll make sure to put a link to the Kickstarter and your shop on Drive-Thru in the show notes too.
Cool. Thank you. Excellent.
So, yeah. Many ways up the same mountain, Grasshopper.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming and talking with me today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a blast. I like pontificating on gaming, I guess.
Yeah, right?
It's a fun topic.
Yeah, and it's nice to have someone else to pontificate with instead of just all by myself all the time.
Yeah, that's never good.
I've never released the episodes where I start arguing with myself. That's never good.
That might be the next phase. Into that role playing against yourself.
Oh, I wish I could do that. That would be so much fun.
Like invent a co-host, you know?
Right? Yeah, that disagrees with everything I say.
Yeah, you gotta have a puppet for them.
I have to do video just so you can see the puppet.
It'd be funny if you didn't do video, but you still used the puppet.
And I still did ventriloquism, even though you can't tell.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, guys. We got to stop. I'm my hand's getting tired. Well, that's going to wrap up episode 88 of Game Master's Journey. I want to thank Ryan again for joining me on the show today and talking about Swans of Black and RPG publishing. It was a fascinating discussion. I love talking RPG stuff. If you would like to reach me here at the show, you can email me at gamemastersjourney@gmail.com. You can follow me on Google+, like Starwalker, and you can follow me on Twitter at like Starwalker. Please visit the website starwalkerstudios.com and check out the show notes for this episode. Within those show notes, I will have a link to Ryan's store on Drive-Thru RPG, as well as the Kickstarter for Swans of Black. I want to give a huge shout out to my Tier 5 patron, Mr. Steve Strickland. Let's hear it for Steve. Woo! Yeah! Go, Steve! Really appreciate all the patrons of Starwalker Studios and all the people who download and listen to the episodes and support the shows. I really appreciate it. Couldn't do it without you. So I hope you have a chance to play your favorite RPG this week. I'll be back soon with another episode of Game Master's Journey. Until then, game on.
This has been a Starwalker Studios production, your source for quality gaming and hobby podcasts.
This episode's music provided by Cloudwalker, Renfield, Transboy, and Ish. Please see the show notes for more details at starwalkerstudios.com/GameMastersJourney.